guys, and welcome back to another video. So we are going to be starting off in my sketchbook for today's little session. I'll talk about it a little bit more once we actually do a little bit of like painting and stuff for the particular sketches that you're seeing right now. So for the past few weeks or so, I guess it's been that long, I've been mostly using like alcohol markers and pen to really like sketch and doodle in my sketchbook more recently. So today I thought it'd be fun to revisit gouache, as I actually have a bit more kind of like marker bleed through on a different page that I would like to cover up. So gouache is an opaque medium, so I would like to potentially use that to help cover up this spread. So I already have like a few sketches already planned out, and I am kind of like priming the paper a little bit with my watercolors. Now I'm gonna say right away that we are not going to really commit to this page very well, and the reason being is that I ended up really struggling with the gouache, and I wanted to do a little bit of testing on a different surface. So even though I'm using watercolor to kind of like prime my paper and also to kind of like plan out the colors a little bit, I don't know if I just forgot how I usually work with gouache, or I just was not really in the mood to really paint that day. I guess it's not like super abnormal for myself, just because I still struggle with gouache like regardless of how prepared I feel. So for this particular spread, I did my sketch with the palette Color ENO, and it's kind of like a colored lead, but it's water soluble, so it will disappear and kind of like lift and mix into your water if you add too much moisture. So I did not do a like cleaner, more permanent sketch with any other type of material before I started doing the watercolor. So right off the bat, I was starting to lose my sketch. But after I did my watercolor wash, I went ahead and switched over to gouache. So this is my gouache palette, and I haven't used it in quite a while. At this point, it's been more or less like cleaned up a little bit. I ended up cleaning out my palette. I don't really remember what I painted with the, I guess like the new and cleaned up palette, I guess in this case. So yeah, it's been quite a while since I've done any painting with gouache, so revisiting it just made me realize how much I still struggle with it. But I guess like on a better note, it does make me feel more motivated again to kind of like pick up my palette and start painting in my sketchbook a little bit more frequently, so that I can still get more comfortable with it as a medium in general, instead of like slowly letting it slip out of my hands. So besides not really having my kind of like sketch being as present when I'm doing like the first initial washes, I definitely think I was a little bit too impatient when I was doing my watercolor washes and transitioning that to my gouache. So oftentimes when I'm doing gouache on this particular paper, and this paper is like notebook paper, it does have like a very smooth surface, so there's not really like any tooth or really like a good thickness or like that papery texture to allow paint and like a more water material to be absorbed into the paper. So I do like kind of like prepping the paper a little bit with watercolor to give it something to grab onto. Also, I feel like once I prime it with watercolor, the gouache just adheres a little bit better instead of on like the glossy surface, so that the paint doesn't kind of like slip and slide or like kind of like spread out on top of the glossy surface. But because I missed a lot of areas or didn't really build up that kind of texture with the watercolor at first, the gouache layers that I ended up doing became very thick very quickly. And I think this is always like one part that I struggle with when I'm using gouache, is that I tend to not allow myself to build up layers right away. And usually, I guess like the style that I go with whenever I work with gouache tends to be a little bit more bolder and less like mixed together, less painterly in a sense. It's almost like more cell shady. So I don't really mind if I don't really get colors to really blend or mix or like look super soft. I'm more like worried about like coverage or making things look somewhat smooth, not in like exactly the transition, but like if I have a solid block of color, the splotchiness sometimes does bother me to a certain extent. And I just realized I didn't really talk about who I was drawing today. So I was trying to do like a little spread of my OC Kaisen with the giant teddy bear that I've drawn him with kind of like in the past. So I was trying to treat this as more of like a painting to allow myself to plan a digital drawing. So I just wanted to do kind of like a warm up, and I don't know if gouache was like the right medium for me to do. I could have done like almost any other medium for me to kind of plan and sketch out just to get into the groove of things. But gouache was just a little bit too much of a struggle for myself, and even though like this current one is going to be very incomplete, I do clean up his face a little bit. I don't really fix too many of the other areas after a certain point. So once we kind of get fed up with this particular piece, I will be switching over to a different surface, and I will not be really completing the little chibi in the top right hand corner, nor am I going to really touch the left hand side that much either. Even though like sometimes when I'm doing spreads in my sketchbook, I do like to tackle them as like a full spread. So keeping like the consistency either of the color palette or the medium or something to tie them all together all the way through. It's just something nice to do aesthetically, I guess, but I don't know. It's just for me, like that's what I like to kind of do for my pieces. So instead of completing the one on the left, I decided to pick out one of these little like postcard sized watercolor hot press paper postcard sheets. So because gouache is basically kind of like an opaque watercolor, I thought that maybe I'll try my best to really practice layering a little bit of the colors, and I wanted to see whether or not using a more absorbent surface that's meant for like wet mediums would be more ideal to paint with, and see if this kind of helps me have a little bit of boost into wanting to do more gouache painting. So you can kind of see like on the back side of this paper, there is like a postcard layout because they are meant to be like little blank postcards for you to do watercolor on. But I decided to put tape on the back so that I can basically tape this down to my board so it won't really budge, and it hopefully won't warp as much while I'm painting. I'm using a kneaded eraser to kind of lighten up my sketch, because one thing I wanted to make sure that I did compared to the ones that I did in my sketchbook is to at least pick a medium that is not going to be disappearing on me while I'm adding water and paint. And if I remember correctly, this particular lead that is by the Uni DIA Colour series doesn't really dissolve with water compared to the Pilot Color ENO, so I decided to use this instead. It's just mostly because graphite's a little bit messy sometimes on a little bit more textured paper, as well as I could not find my Prismacolor Kohl Erase in the color Carmine, and that's what I usually use when I'm doing kind of like these sketches. So I just decided to use what I had, and luckily this one actually worked quite well. You can kind of see like some of the lighter lines are going to get covered up quite quickly. They do blend in with the more wet or like any of the mediums that have more moisture, so they will slowly disappear and we'll just be left with my cleaner lines anyways. So kind of like right off the bat, I did like the fact that I could layer up slowly and have a little bit more of like that almost dustier watercolor feeling while I was doing some of the lighter washes and having like more of that transparency. But I was not sure if I understood how to layer it properly to some extent while I was doing some of the darker areas, but I think that's just me needing to get used to using gouache again. I do have like a few other videos where I've used gouache and I did like the outcome, but there's plenty of videos that I've done alongside with like other sketches and attempts where I just don't like the result of the gouache piece in general, so it's just something that I personally need to either work on or just accept that it's gonna look a certain way for a while. But while I'm like working on this piece, I do like the fact that I was able to layer a little bit more on this particular paper. The paper also doesn't really warp while I'm adding a lot of water because one, it's taped down, but also it's like a much thicker surface. I believe this one's about like 300 GSM. It's kind of like my favorite GSM to work with when I'm working with wet mediums. Any thicker I feel like is just not needed, especially because usually the thicker the paper with like a heavier GSM, it just becomes more pricier. And I feel like 300 is just a good solid type of paper that works well with a lot of like wet mediums. I know like mixed media is around like I think 240-ish, and that works well as well. So yeah, just the difference between this and like the notebook paper, there are some differences, but I don't think it's like the main reason why I can't really like my gouache paintings whenever I paint them in my sketchbook. The main reason is probably just me not having enough patience, and part of that might be because I'm recording, so maybe I'll record things like way in advance, allow myself to kind of like marinate with the painting instead of like, you know, try to churn it out as fast as I can because I want to be done with it. But I guess also like in my sketchbook, I don't usually take a lot of time to a piece. Like I don't really like having sketches or a drawing that's in my sketchbook for many days, if that makes sense. If I can, I would like to knock it out in the same day because I don't tend to do more finished works in my sketchbook compared to like if I have like Bristol board, vellum, or watercolor paper boards or anything like that, where it's like more of a surface that I feel like I want to keep more like pristine and separate. Anything in my sketchbook I feel like is fair game to be like either scrapped or covered, or just like I don't really need to see them ever again. So you know, maybe I should just take that pressure off and just doodle and just try my best to find a way to work with the gouache in a way that doesn't make me feel so frustrated. Do let me know if you have a medium that you feel like no matter what you do, you just feel more frustrated working with it. I'm sure like, I guess like some people prefer like dry mediums, some people might prefer wet mediums, or even like traditional versus digital. So yeah, everyone just has like their own preferences and stuff, and definitely gouache is something that I will continue to fight with, and I will definitely have more bad days than good days, but overall I think it's just like still fun to learn how to use it. That kind of reminded me though, so besides the fact that gouache is like a medium that I struggle with, another one is oil pastels and pastels in general. And as a super late Christmas gift, because like I think I mentioned last week or the week before that, I went to a little hot pot gathering for my friend, and we finally got to do like our little mini gift exchange. So my friend's birthdays are both in the later half of the year, so like kind of like autumn to winter, and we try to do our gift exchange whenever we can meet up all together so that we can kind of, you know, tackle usually Christmas as well along with their birthdays and just do it all at once. But because like life gets so busy and no one's schedule is kind of like lining up, we didn't see each other technically in person for like 2.5 months. We still had like our weekly calls like every so often, but there was like no good opportunity to go give our gifts. So I finally got my gift from one of my friends, and I think it's like the Christmas gift. And she remembered that I was not fond of using oil pastels, so she gifted me a chalk pastel, I believe, or like soft pastel set alongside with another form of it. And she's like, I hope like this makes you like get used to it, or like you'll like this medium compared to oil pastels. And I don't know, I thought it was sweet that she gave me 2 different forms to let me kind of like try out and see like which one I liked better. And I'm glad she remembered that I really disliked oil pastels for a while. So maybe for a video or something I will give that a try, because I don't remember the last time I even used chalk pastels. I've definitely used oil pastels a little bit more recently. I think it's like 2 sketchbooks ago, I did like a really abstract looking flower thing because I wanted to test out how to use it. And maybe in the future I will come back to use oil pastels, because I am always amazed that people can use it in such a way that actually resembles like oil painting. So maybe I'll find some of my palette brushes and stuff and find some other tools that we can use to use the oil pastels, because I do think I was given a set before in the past of oil pastels that I have not really touched. So it would be nice to see if I can actually use it to actually make a piece with that's kind of like more akin to what I want to use it for. So we'll see if I can use it in the future. But back to the little painting on the screen, I always tend to like my stuff a little bit more once I end up doing like something to add more contrast, or in this case, doing the line art to kind of clean everything up. But my favorite part usually when it comes to like painting in general tends to be the hair. I get to play around like a little bit more with texture or like adding in highlights for this case, but in watercolors it's fun to like play with the shadows, other colors, like adding more of like hair strands. The lighting is always fun. So definitely when I was working on this one of Kaisen, I had fun just adding a few colors to his hair. The bear became super derpy. I will reintroduce the bear in the future because I think I want him to be like a little character, part of like Masaki's world, similar to Hansuke, but they're going to be more like mascot characters that are popular in their universe, and then in their like Hansuke and this character's little universe, they're just going to be like little critters running around, I guess. And to kind of like make this piece feel a little bit more finished, I decided to pull out an acrylic marker and just kind of like do a small border around Kaisen and the bear, just to kind of like tie it off. I think it just looks cuter, adding a little bit more of that pinkish red as well. So yeah. So now with this piece done, I decided that I will just go ahead and paste this on top of our left hand sketch. And you might notice that I actually used some acrylic markers to do some of the flowers, because maybe I was going to go back and actually do the gouache painting of the one on the left, but I think we're just going to stick this one in here. And I will see if I can remember to put a photo of what my spread actually looks like right now. So I ended up making like a bunch of stickers of the little blue bear, kind of redesigned a little bit because I forgot some details while I was painting him here. And I'll put that on the screen for you guys to see. Oh, I also forgot. I was planning to do like a larger version of Kaisen in my sketchbook so that I would have an easier time painting instead of working on a small scale. So I'll remember that for next time. But hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video, and I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!